Welcome to Antique Dust Pop-Up Podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Antique Dust. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Rob.
And together we are Antique Dust.
Dust.
Woo!
Woo!
Yay! So, we are doing the pop-up podcast, and we, from one of our faithful listeners, have been asked to review Catweasel.
Catweasel.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I have been reluctant to watch Catweasel.
Why have you been reluctant to watch Catweasel,
Because
Jonathan?
it's on a similar line to Wurzel Gummidge. I just didn't like the aesthetic of the person. I mean, and the storyline is really
So you didn't like the look of Catweasel?
No, that was it. Because he was one of these... The characters, like one of those characters when you were told at primary school or prep school, when you were told not to talk to strangers.
Yeah.
In my mind's eye, it was don't talk to strangers
Who look like Catweasel.
who look like tramps and that sort of thing. And the Catweasel aesthetic really just it just gives me
so
sort
Catweasel is the stuff of your nightmares.
It is, along with Wurzel Gummidge.
Along with Wurzel Gummidge.
Because I just didn't like...
Didn't like the look.
I didn't like the aesthetic.
You didn't like the look of him.
No, I mean, if he was a sort of a debonair wizard from the whichever 15th century... Is it 15th century?
I think it's nearer to the 11th or 12th century.
Right, so...
Because he was running away from Normans.
Yeah, I mean, the general storyline...
Yeah, so now we establish your antipathy towards Catweasel, shall we talk about...
Yeah,
program?
Catweasel is a wizard from the past history. He
11th
was...
or 12th century, probably.
He doesn't seem to be very good at wizarding as such.
Yes.
However, he's very into wizarding-y things. And you meet him when he's sort of collecting herbs and plants from the forest.
To make spells.
To make a spell, and then he gets caught by the...
He's been chased by the Normans, who don't seem to like wizards very much.
No. And he casts a spell to sort of make him sort of away from the situation, and then he transports himself to 1970s Britain.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's dressed a bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi, where Obi-Wan Kenobi had gone through a hedge backwards.
I think he has literally gone through a hedge backwards.
Yeah, and through a lake in a puddle.
A lake.
He jumps into a lake to escape, and then when he comes out of the water, he ends up coming up in a puddle.
A 20th century puddle.
Yes, in 1970s Britain. And he sort of seeks refuge in a barn, and then is introduced to an 11-year-old or 12-year-old boy whose dad owns the farm, and that's where supposed hijinks happen.
Yeah, that's where the story really, really takes off.
I know that you really liked it.
Yeah, well, the Catweasel was, I'm not that old, so I don't remember Catweasel in its first time out.
It only went for one series, didn't it?
I think it went for 2 series.
Right. There was less than 20 episodes.
Yeah, it didn't. I think essentially it ran its course. The second series gets a bit more slapstick, and I think Jeffrey Belden was happy for it to end at that point. They'd sort of done everything that they needed to do.
Yeah, it is one of these stories where you could imagine it probably enthralled many a child, because obviously it was a children's program.
Enthralled my family.
Really, the whole family?
Yeah, pretty much. My first introduction to Catweasel wasn't watching it, but hearing my dad talking about it, and he used to talk about electricity and referencing bits from Catweasel. So it was a hit. It was a hit in my family, anyway.
Right.
It wasn't until many years later, I think probably on reruns or classic TV reruns that I ever actually saw any Catweasel.
Yeah, it is a slapstick comedy series. And the opening sequence and the sort of the cartoony things was actually quite mildly amusing, and I think it would have probably made a little bit of a better cartoon than a live action thing. I think I'd probably be a little bit more acceptable because the cartoon element of Catweasel as the illustration looks a little bit more clean. Because he just
not as grubby.
I mean I think that's the thing. He just
for
looked really, really grubby, and I just thought, ooh, no. And it still gives me like, ooh, it's yeah.
He's shuddering and shivering.
Yeah,
at this
just it just didn't hit that mark for me, and there was a series of misadventures where there's a long scene where Catweasel is enthralled with light bulbs being switched on.
Yes, electricery.
And that went on a little bit too long. And then he follows the boy. The boy is befriended him. And I just thought, well, sorry, you're a landowner's son, and you've got a posh daddy, and you're entertaining the staff. Because he's one of the parts of the storyline is they one of the sort of the farm hands who looks a little bit old, and in fairness, that bit was a bit sinister as well, because there's a 12-year-old who was inviting around this roughy-tufty sort of labourer to come and watch television with him.
I think you're
I don't know.
You're viewing it all through modern
through
eyes.
stranger danger eyes, because there was that. So you've got
more
this
innocent time.
I just felt that the farmhand was not quite right, and it reminds me a little bit of Lenny from Of Mice and Men, where there's a little bit of innocence where he just didn't feel. He just didn't feel right. Now I don't know if in other episodes he's more is a bit different, or the character wasn't in further episodes, but it just didn't feel right. It was that whole stranger danger sort of feel about it, where you've got a grown man coming round to watch television with a 12-year-old when dad's out at the pub. And
as I say, I think
maybe I'm looking too much into it.
I think you are to be fair, and you're I guess you're importing something from
my own
the
childhood,
present day. And well, I don't want to go into delve into that, but you're certainly think you're importing something from present times.
And I don't quite get why you've got someone that looks very obviously homeless, why the son didn't actually tell his father about it, rather than befriend him, because Catweasel he doesn't come across as very likeable.
No, that's true.
And you wouldn't think, I mean, like with Wurzel Gummidge, obviously I have watched more Wurzel Gummidge rather than just one episode of Catweasel, but he was an innocent, he felt like a bit of an innocent, and you could feel that he was looking for friends, and it didn't feel too sinister. But Catweasel just comes across as very unlikable. I mean, I know the Madcap Adventures and that sort of thing, where he's sort of the trickery, electricity, or whatever it was, and I just thought, I mean, you'd have thought for a wizard, you'd be used to sort of the magical things, but then again, he wasn't a very good wizard, was he?
Well, that's the point, really, that he wasn't a very good wizard.
So, have you watched all the episodes?
I don't know if I've watched all the episodes, but I've probably watched more episodes than you've watched.
How does the actual series end?
You mean how does the second series end? Well, the second series is a bit different, if I remember correctly. It seems to be following more of a puzzle-solving route. So in every episode, Catweasel has to solve a puzzle, and he believes that solving the puzzles will provide him with the key to returning
to his time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't remember if that's how it
ends. He goes back to his time.
How it ends. I think it probably ends a little bit ambiguously. Probably.
Yeah. So I mean, it is definitely of its time, and there is a general innocence about it.
There was. Definitely. I mean, all your subtext and all that subtextual reading into it that you're doing, I think is a little bit over the top.
Well, maybe I was a bit hysterical. I mean, I don't think I'd want to watch any more of it, and it's I don't know. It's just really weird because it has sort of created a reaction. I mean, because there's a lot of things we think, well, it's of its time, yeah, a bit dated, a bit, yeah, but I just don't like it. Really. And it's really weird, and I feel like, because most of the things we look at are, yeah, it's good fun, and I just don't. It doesn't sit right, and that's really weird.
That's interesting.
But I'm not really a fan of slapstick. I don't mind a little bit of the carry-on humour, but I don't when it gets a carry-on where you've got sort of food fights and stuff like that. That just didn't. It doesn't really sit well with me, and the Catweasel takes it to that nth degree with the slapstick, and I'm not a fan, in fairness.
I mean, I suppose one of the things that perhaps is worth bearing in mind is that this was very much a children's show, and sometimes with children's shows you just have to go with it. You know, you can't necessarily try and read too much into it or try and work out the motivation or any of that kind of stuff. But it's about setting up, setting up showpiece scenes where funny things happen.
Yeah, so I suppose so. What did the actor who played Catweasel go on to do?
He went on to do a number of things. Thank you for surprising me with that question. So
I'm asking the question
very quickly.
The
main thing I remember him from was Porridge.
Was he in Porridge?
Yes, he was the prison governor.
Really?
He was also in an episode that you may or may not remember of Bergerac.
I think I do remember you saying that's Catweasel. That was in the first couple of series, wasn't it? Of Bergerac.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's one of the ones that we podcasted on.
Yeah. So,
if you want to catch up with the
back catalogue, the first 3 series of Bergerac. Woohoo!
So a précis of Geoffrey Bayldon's career. 60s and 70s, he appeared in several films, Casino Royale, The Pink Panther Strikes Again, both film versions of Steptoe and Son. Did a few Hammer films, Dracula, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, Tales from the Crypt. He appeared in Ladies in Lavender in 2004. Several Doctor Who appearances.
Ooh, Doctor Who Klaxon.
Yes. And some of the Big Finish audio plays.
Is he still alive?
No, he died in 2017 at the age of 93.
Gosh. But he just seems to have been the same age.
Yeah,
he's one of those
been around forever. You know.
What was it? Was it John? No, not Johnny Briggs. The one that played the one with the white moustache in Dad's Army. He was
Clive Dunn.
Clive Dunn, that's it. And he was in.
Yeah. The thing about Clive Dunn is he played old men while he was still young, so he just seemed to be permanently old.
Yeah, I mean that was it because he was in. I remember he was in a children's TV show called Grandad, which was a bit slapsticky.
That was definitely slapsticky.
Yeah,
I was never a fan.
No,
Grandad.
I think it was one of those things where if there was nothing else on, you'd watch it. But it was an adult playing and not being very bright, and getting to madcap adventures. But I think there was a certain type of actor at that time that seemed to cross over from children's to adults drama quite easily. But nowadays, I don't know what the sort of this general children's TV shows are like, because it used to be sort of lots of ensemble things, like you had Grange Hill and what was it? I remember the Famous Five in the 70s. I used to love the Famous Five.
Yeah. Of course, Geoffrey Bayldon crossed over to Wurzel Gummidge.
Because wasn't he the
He
master?
was,
he was the
master.
not the
he
master.
was the Crow Man.
The Crow Man,
He was
yes.
the Crow Man.
Yeah.
In Wurzel Gummidge.
And he had, I remember he had, I quite liked the Crow Man because he was quite articulate and he had gravitas. And I quite liked that. But I wasn't a fan of Wurzel Gummidge because it was...
Because he was grubby.
It was grubby, yeah.
He was grubby.
That was
That
it.
offended
Yeah,
young Johnny's sensitivity.
yeah, have a bath, have a shower, sweetie. Yeah, but
Given that he was made of straw, that would be rather risky for Wurzel Gummidge, though, wouldn't it? Have jumping into a bath. Like
turn to hay bale, marvellous, be square.
He'd just come to bits and float off.
Oh, what was Wurzel Gummidge's? Una Stubbs was in it.
Aunt Sally.
Aunt Sally. I really quite liked Aunt Sally, and I loved it when Una Stubbs then it sort of turned up as being the landlady in Sherlock, especially towards this was the contemporary version, where she constantly had one-liners and she just stole the show, especially in the last series where it turns out she's got an Aston Martin and she'd previously been married to a drug dealer.
Yeah.
It was just...
She was just doing it for fun.
She was for shits and giggles. But nowadays, I don't know what... obviously, I don't really watch children's TV shows, but it all just seems to be cartoons and that type of thing.
I suppose it's one of the downsides of having dedicated children's channels is that unlike the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, us adults rarely get to see any children's programming, whereas when it was that, the tea time slot on BBC One or on ITV, then you're much more likely, even if you were just waiting for the news to come on. That's why the very short cartoons or, Magic Roundabout and Rhubarb became well known and popular amongst adults, was because it was just before the news. So they kind of...
Oh, and I think because my goddaughter Francesca, she's in The Worst Witch, so I think they're still filming that and everything, and she's been in a few of those sort of TV shows, but I've only seen clips of it on sort of the social media and everything. I've never actually
watched an episode.
Sat through an episode. Sorry, Francesca. But I don't know. I think it's definitely of its time, and I don't think.
What about what? Let's just talk maybe a little bit about the production values of it.
It looked expensive.
It did look expensive. It was shot on film, 16mm film.
And what I really quite liked
colour.
is because the 70s were very pop, and sort of the tractor popped. I don't think I've ever seen such a clean tractor.
That pleased you.
That pleased me.
Pleased
clean
you.
tractor, nice Lando. But it did. The visuals were really good because we've also watched an episode of Time Slip.
Yeah.
And
which we're not going to talk a little bit. Well, we're not
no,
going to talk
but
about now.
but they were both done for commercial TV, weren't
Yeah.
they? Because Catweasel was an ITV production, wasn't it?
Catweasel was made for LWT.
So it did look like it was
And
expensively
Time Slip
made.
was made by ATV, and I think we can definitely see that Time Slip. We're not really going to talk about it now, but was very much a studio-based, multi-camera, traditional TV show
where Catweasel felt like it was all done on location.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like there was any sets.
Yeah, and it was all done on film, so it was essentially shot like a movie.
Yeah,
and
it looks a lot more expensive.
It did
than quite a lot of. I mean, they spent a lot of money on it, and you could see that. I mean, the child actor could act, and Catweasel, the actor that played Catweasel, he was really in character. You could get that, and I think he was more of a he's obviously done lots of movies and everything, but I think he's a very trained theatrical, as in theatre. So that came out, but I think that worked for the character because the character was meant to be a little bit of a different world.
Well, yes, he definitely was,
and that came through. I mean, I can't fault the acting, and I can't fault the casting, and the way it was blocked out was fast-paced. It wasn't laborious.
Which is perhaps another comparison we can make with Time Slip that we're not going to talk about now.
Too much.
But
Spoilers, sweetie.
spoilers. But there was a pace to Catweasel.
Yeah, well, I think with Catweasel, you could see that it was a tightly run show, and you had the pacing elements, and there was nothing laborious, and there was no padding, because it was like 25-minute episode, and there would be a commercial break midway through, and you could see the pacing of how it rolls along. And the opening sequence, you knew exactly what was happening, and you could watch it without with the sound off, because there isn't really a great deal of dialogue for the first few minutes, but it was action driven. So you saw him collecting herbs, you saw him go into his hidey hole where he's got his magician's bits and pieces and the owl and all that sort of thing.
There wasn't any point where I felt that the action dragged.
No, the pace
was maintained,
and I think it was an action version of a cartoon, and that's how it was being played, and it wasn't complicated, so you knew exactly who was what and where, and you could see who was the ally, who was going to be the grown up in the whole situation. So on that score, the production values you can't fault. The opening title sequence, obviously a lot of money went on that, because it was a cartoon, wasn't it?
It was.
And it was so it was animation,
proper animation,
and so you could really see they'd spent money on it. And I wonder if it actually went out in America. I wonder how the American audience would have taken to it, or do you think, because it is very succinctly British?
It is very British, but I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. I've not done any research on that, but British things tend to do, or at least tended to do, quite well in America.
I mean, because the equivalent over in America, I think you'd had like the Red Hand Gang, which was sort of their equivalent of the famous Five. Then you'd have also had lots of the Disney things, where you've got cutesy kids and that sort of thing, that sort of set up sort of adults against children, children against adults, that sort of thing. So I think it was quite different to what had previously been on before. So I think that's why it probably stands the test of time. I mean, there are some pops of 1970s in it. However, it's set on this episode was set on a farm, and it could have been present day.
Yeah, it could have been. I mean, obviously, some elements of it might, the decor, etc., would be a little bit old fashioned. But
you think it's a farmhouse, so it's going to be utilitarian. It's going to be hard wearing. It's going to be what it is. What I did find very amusing was the orange cordial bottle. Because it was, I remember those orange cordial bottles. They'd taken the label off it as well, so that's what sort of indicated it was sort of
a commercially available product.
Commercially available product, but they literally take. But I remember that it was that orange juice, because we used to have that, and so it was an orange cordial, so it's a squash.
Yes. And for me, it was also part of that was also the plastic beakers that were on the table.
But I think some people, they still have the plastic beakers, but having the cordial out with a jug of water to have with the said cordial, and I thought, oh yeah, that was a little bit of nostalgia. But I can appreciate the pacing. I can appreciate the production values.
But you would have preferred it if Catweasel had just had a good wash.
Yeah, it had been a bit cleaner. That would have. But I think there's another episode, because there's a few memes that go around with Catweasel in the bath, having a bath.
Well, a comment was made of how he smelled.
There was a smell around.
He was a bit whiffy.
But then again, he had been in a pond, and then woken and come
through. To be honest, 12th, 11th, 12th century. Perhaps the level of cleanliness wasn't as high as we currently have. Possibly.
But yeah, so I can appreciate it, and it's not going to be something I want to watch again. But I mean, I've been aware of Catweasel, but I think I've always avoided because, yeah, it for me it doesn't work for me. But the pacing and everything, and I can appreciate it for what it is. And they have had as acting talent in there. Did the young boy go on to do anything? I wonder as an actor.
Thanks for asking me a question without any.
He's checking Wikipedia
without any notice. Let me have a look.
I mean, because the young lad he did really well. Because normally you sometimes find a lot of these sort of drama TV shows that are for children's TV, the acting can be a little bit wooden, but he was very natural.
Yeah. So the actor who played Carrot wasn't
Carrot, yeah, because it was gin. It was slightly ginger.
Robert Davis. So he was Welsh. A child actor, obviously, appeared in the BBC soap opera The Newcomers. Best known for two of his earliest TV roles. Obviously playing Carrot, where he had his hair dyed. And then he went on to appear in And Mother Makes 3 with Wendy Craig the following year. He then appeared in the sequel in Mother Makes 5. Film credits include If, The Blood on Satan's Claw, Britannia Hospital. He did a cameo in Shakespeare in Love.
Oh gosh.
He had roles in Doomwatch, Worship, A Moment in Time, and Spearhead. And he sadly died in 2010.
Oh,
gosh. At the age of 56.
Gosh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Oh. So he seems like, I mean, because he did come across incredibly well. He was you could see he wasn't just blocking out the lines just to get them out of the way with which he was actually working with what he got. But then again, he was working opposite Catweasel, and I imagine they probably went through a lot of rehearsals, and the actor that played Catweasel probably, when you're acting with people that can act, it does have a tendency to up your game.
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine that if you weren't up to snuff acting against up against an actor like Jeffrey Beldon played Catweasel, you would pale into insignificance.
But it looked as though it was well rehearsed, it was well delivered, and so I mean, the production, as I said, I can't fault the production, I can't fault the aesthetics, and it doesn't date, and I think if it ran again. Based on that one episode, it would probably be very popular with a lot of children, even now. So it wouldn't look as
well. There's quite an appetite now, I think, for
classic,
for magic and wizardry. You know, we've got Harry Potter to thank for that.
But I think everyone. I think if the Catweasel hadn't been so feral and grubby, and was slightly more articulate and had befriended the child, and it was quite like Dumbledore or something like that, looking sort of wise and surprised rather than like shock, horror, sort of here, there, and everywhere. Then it would have probably resonated a little bit better for me, but. It works.
Well, you can't win them all.
No, you can't win them all.
Can't win them all.
No. But anyway, so if anyone else who has listened to this podcast that has ambitions to recreate Catweasel, actually, if it was going to be remade today, who do you think would play Catweasel?
I don't know. Who do you think would play Catweasel?
Ooh. Well, if it was done in sort of the sanitized version.
Yes. So a clean Catweasel.
A clean Catweasel. Oh God, what was the actor that played the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin of Sherwood?
Nicholas Grace.
Yes, who was also in the fabulous Brideshead Revisited.
Yes.
I think he would possibly be a good cat weasel, because I think he'd bring out the campery of it.
We certainly would. There's no doubt about that.
And I think he'd probably be the right age for it now.
70 something.
So I think he'd probably be able to get some of the physicality out, but also be able to work it. So I think him.
Okay.
For children, I don't know. So maybe Francesca. Maybe have my goddaughter Francesca could play a female version, but that could be a bit weird anyway. Sort of changing roles. Well, then again, you suppose you could have a female cat weasel. If it was a female cat weasel,
what?
Miriam Margolyes.
Miriam Margolyes.
Or whatever. Yeah, I can never pronounce the surname. But she would be a great female cat weasel. You could imagine. Well, she was very good in Harry Potter.
She was. She definitely was.
You can imagine the physicality of that.
I can imagine it. I can imagine it. Anyway.
So,
I think we've wittered on enough for
fabulous. So anyway, if anyone else has any fabulous wise comments to share about Cat Weasel, please let us know at Antique Dust. We're on all social media platforms. You can email us at hello@antiquedust.co.uk.
I'm imagining that most of our audience probably quite like cat weasels, so I think this is probably a bit of an outlier. As they say.
Right. Well, yeah, perhaps. But anyway, let us know if you have any lovely tales to say about Cat Weasel, or if you think they should remake Cat Weasel. Who would they cast? Who would they cast as Cat Weasel? And do you think it would be good to have the sort of a role reversal with regards to sort of male to female roles? But anyway, let's know at Antique Dust. In the meantime, it's Jonathan signing off saying farewell.
And this is Rob saying bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to an Antique Dust pop-up podcast.